Yeah. So the avidya or ajnana or ignorance is an important problem in Vedic philosophy. Now, I put some signpostings here. So when you talk about ignorance, you need to ask, what is ignorance? Who has brought this ignorance? How does this ignorance operate? Where is the ignorance? When does the ignorance come into being? And why does the ignorance come into being? So these are the 6 key questions that we need to ask when we talk about ignorance. Now, the Vedantic philosophies have diversified. They have diverse views on this. Yeah. Now, this becomes important because, as we discussed before, philosophy is the determination of things as they are in themselves. This is called Tattva Nirnaya. Now, for such philosophy, we should always base our philosophy on experience. Yeah. Philosophy should be based on experience. Any philosophy that goes against experience is no philosophy, and any philosophy that does not take experience into consideration is just dry intellectual speculation. So any philosophy that goes with experience makes sense to us as human beings. Yeah. So this becomes a key problem. So now philosophizing or doing Shastra Vichara. So let me put it in Sanskrit parlance, Shastra Vichara. So if I have to do Shastra Vichara, then the Vedantic acharyas have defined some rules as to what is worthy of Shastra Vichara. If something, I don't want to know about how many teeth crow has, is that a Shastra Vichara? How many Kaka Dantaha? This is a specific concept in Sanskrit philosophy. So do I have to know how many teeth that the crow have, and should I have to spend time with that? Is that worthwhile philosophy? No. Philosophy should have a purpose. So our acharyas have brought about this concept called Anubandha Chatushtaya. That is what I have put it in the red box, called Anubandha Chatushtaya. Anubandha Chatushtaya means, Chatushtaya as you mean is 4. So for any proper Shastra Vichara, 4 criteria have to be met. Okay. One is called Adhikari. Adhikari means a qualified student should be there. Vishaya. Vishaya means there must be a sensible or a suitable topic to discuss. Then Prayojana. Prayojana means there must be some use by doing that discussion. And then the relationship between these 3 is Sambandha. So all these 4 should be there for any Shastra Vichara. Let me take a colloquial example. If I want to do medicine and I have to become a doctor, then first I have to get extremely good marks in my A levels. Yeah. So when I've got good marks, then I become the Adhikari. I'm a qualified student. Vishaya. So Vishaya is to study medicine over 4.5 years. I have to study medicine, I have to study anatomy, physiology, etc. and I have to study. So that is the Vishaya. What is the Prayojana at the end? After I have studied for 4.5 years and I have done my house jobs, I become a doctor. So that is the Prayojana. That is the result of me as an Adhikari studying a Vishaya. Then I become it has come to some use to me. Then what is the Sambandha for this? Sambandha is, I have to write an application form and submit my application form to the university. When I apply medicine, I have to take a bus and I go to the university. I have to walk, I have to write exam. So all these that is linked, these 3 becomes the Sambandha. So when all these 4 are present, then it becomes Anubandha Chatushtaya. So when it is Anubandha Chatushtaya is satisfied, then the philosophy becomes worthy of study. Okay, so that's called Arambaniyatva. So Arambaniyatva of Shastra is when there is Anubandha Chatushtaya. So this is a key concept in Vedic philosophy, and I would like you to just bear that in mind for this slide and for the subsequent slide. Adhikari should be there, a Vishaya should be there, Prayojana should be there, and a Sambandha should be there. Okay, so this becomes relevant to our discussion of ignorance. Where is this ignorance is the key question. Okay. Now, let us take what the monistic school of philosophy, classically Advaita, what is Advaita's view on who has ignorance. Okay. So the Advaita's view, this is a very basic definition, but you can do your reading, or maybe later we can talk about this in subsequent classes. So the Advaita view is, look guys, it says there is only one entity in this world. So there is below these parrots, below the parrots, I put a verse here, which is the axiom of Advaita. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Na Paraha. Okay, let's split that. So Brahma Satyam. Brahma Satyam means the supreme Brahman is the only Satya, is the only real. Jagat, Jagat means this universe, this created universe is Mithya. Mithya means unreal. Okay? Some would say unreal and illusion are synonymous. There is no major difference between unreal and real. But for now, let's hold on to that concept as Jagan Mithya. Then the next word, Jivo Brahma Eva. Okay? Then it says, this is an important verse. Jivo Brahma Eva. So that means Jiva is Brahman. Okay? That's called Brahma Atma Aikya concept. Jivo Brahma Eva Na Aparaha. Aparaha means different. Na means no. So they are non-different. So it says Jivo Brahma Eva Na Aparaha. Okay? So basically it is a concept of Brahmatma Aikya. Hold on to the concept of Advaita and you can think about this in the coming days. So now coming back to our Nirguna Brahman, which is this one sad parrot which is there called the Nirguna Brahman. The view from the Advaitic philosophy is this ignorance, this primordial ignorance called Avidhya, does a few things to this Brahman that brings about this whole of existence. So what does this Avidhya do? Number one, Avidhya gets superimposed on Brahman, and that superimposition somehow leads to the creation of the universe. It is very similar to the two classic examples that are given. One is called Shukti Rajata, okay? And the other one is the rope and the snake. So when there is a rope, there is a superimposition of the snake. Similarly, when there is a conch shell in the beach, somehow it looks like a silver. So those are the two examples that are given as to how Avidhya brings about the manifestation of the universe, which is not real, similar to a snake superimposed on a rope or a silver superimposed on a conch shell. So that is because of Avidhya. So that is the creation of the material universe. Now what about the jivas? Now again, what is supposed to happen is this Nirguna Brahman again has a type of Avidhya. So in Advaita, Avidhya has got various names. It's called Maya, it is called Ajnana, it's called Avidhya, but essentially it's also called Upadhi. Upadhi, Avidhya and Maya, they are all synonymous in Advaitic philosophy. Essentially they mean the same thing. Yeah? So but they somehow seem to have different functions. So Avidhya makes the unreal universe, whereas the same ignorance of the Avidhya, when superimposed on Nirguna Brahman, becomes what is called as a Saguna Brahman, a Brahman with attributes. And a further Avidhya that goes on this Saguna Brahman. So this Avidhya here is called Upadhi. So this guy then creates the jivas, appearance of the jivas. So this is how the creation view is in Advaitic philosophy, where you have this ignorance or Avidhya. One component becomes the universe, and the same Avidhya is instrumental in bringing about Saguna Brahman and the appearance of the jivas. The jivas themselves are not real because they just don't exist in reality, because it is Brahmatma Aikya. Jivo Brahma Eva. So the Jiva himself is Brahman, and somehow it appears that the Jiva is going through this samsara. And how has that come about? That is where the Advaitic concept of ignorance of Brahmatma Aikya. Because there is ignorance of Brahma and Atma Aikya, the Jivas somehow have thought that I am this individual person, that I am going through samsara. Once you get the knowledge of Brahmatma Aikya, then everything else dissolves. Very similar to when I see the snake on the rope, but when I go closer and investigate, there is no snake there, there is only the rope, then the knowledge of the snake disappears and the knowledge of the rope appears. Similarly, with philosophical inquiry, and once we understand Brahmatma Aikya, then the ignorance of Jiva Brahma Veda goes away and Brahmatmaikya comes around, and then you realize you are that supreme consciousness. So this is the core essence of Advaitic philosophy. Now, the reason why I have put the subsequent slide, it is slightly complicated, but I just want to illustrate. It is a fascinating hypothesis. So, Abhijit, we are still in the previous slide. So this is a fascinating concept. So there is this. This is still Abhijit. Sorry, do you want to move back to the previous slide, please? Previous. There. Thank you. Yeah. So so the Brahmatmika concept becomes very important. So now the polemics is, how does the Vedantic philosophy evolve over hundreds of years? So this particular philosophy came about around in the 6th century AD. It became very popular throughout India. But there have been countermeasures that have happened during the evolution of Vedic philosophy. So for example, other Vedantic schools will ask the question about the key questions of Brahmatmaikya. Yeah, so these are very subtle points, and I hope I'll be able to run past some of the concepts that you can then hold on and do your own studies. So, for example, in the Dvaita school, there are many works looking at these concepts. There is something called Mayavada Kandana, Nitya Anumana Kandana, Upadi Kandana, and so on. So these are core philosophical texts actually looking at these concepts in great detail. Abhijit, previous slide, please. So in the Brahmatmaika concept, so the question there is, for example, Dvaita will ask, is the Brahmatmaika concept different from Brahman or non-different from Brahman? If it is different from Brahman, is it real or is it unreal? So if the Brahmatmaika concept is real, then what will happen is their own axiom of Brahma alone is Satya, Brahma Satyam, Jagan Nitya goes away. Then their philosophy goes away if Brahmatmaika concept is considered as real. If Brahmatmaika concept is unreal, then if the concept is unreal, then the opposite should be true. Now, if you say that the Brahmatmaika is part of Brahman, then it means that this is already known. If I am already Jiva Brahmaikya, I know this already. What is the point of doing philosophical study? Is Brahmatmaikya a quality of Brahman? If that is the case, that is impossible, because Nirguna Brahman by definition has no gunas. Is Brahmatmaikya intrinsic to Brahman? It is not possible, because ignorance which is external cannot cover something that is internal. For example, I know me, or Sudarshan knows himself as Sudarshan. Just because he closes his eyes, then does he become unaware of his existence? Or just because he switches off the light in his room, does he become unaware of his existence? Or just because he closes the door, he becomes unaware of his existence? Or if he locks his house so that nobody can come and see him, does he become unaware of himself? No, because all the coverings that I've told you so far are external. They are not internal. So if Brahmatmaikya is intrinsic to Brahman, no amount of Ajnana can actually cover it. So this is, I'm just want to illustrate some interesting philosophical concepts. Now, the Advaita philosopher that will say, no, Brahmatma, so somehow Brahman, the ignorance actually penetrates into Brahman and then creates the ignorance. If that is the case, then all schools of philosophy consider Brahman as akhanda or partless. If something is partless, then how can ignorance penetrate it? Okay. If ignorance covers the Brahman, is it real or unreal? So these are all some of the issues that I want to talk about and let you know how the Vedic philosophy is actually evolved. This is fascinating. This is a highly intellectual exercise, much more complex and rigorous compared to any Western philosophical books that I have studied over the years. So for Nirguna Brahman, what is being covered? Nothing can cover something that has no gunas, for example. So Acharya will ask, Ajnata akile samvetuhu gatate na putashtana. That is another problem. If Ajnata akile samvetuhu means somebody who knows everything, Sarvajna, somebody who knows everything, how can ignorance cover something that is all-knowing? It is like saying there is the sun and I'm going to take a paper and cover the sun. Is that possible? Mundaka Upanishad says, yes, Sarvajnaha Sarvavid, Jnanamayam Tapaha. So it celebrates this Brahman as Sarvajnaha. He knows everything. thing. Taittiriya Upanishad says Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. He is Jnanam, he is knowledge embodiment. How can an infinitely knowledgeable being be covered by ignorance? That whole term is self-contradictory. Either you accept your Brahman is not Sarvajna, or we should not be praying Brahman, we should pray Avidhya, because he is so powerful that he can actually cover Brahman. So these are all the concepts that come about. So how can ignorance cover the all-knowing Brahman? So something for us to think about, but my aim here was not to be critical of an Advaita viewpoint, but my aim here is to illustrate how the philosophical inquiry actually evolves and how in the Indian Vedantic system things have evolved. Philosophy of the Vedanta did not stop at the 6th century. It evolved with Ramanuja in the 11th century and matured further with the philosophy of Madhvacharya. So I really need to stress this point. Some people out there think Vedantic philosophy stops at the 6th century with Sankaracharya. But please read the philosophical works of Ramanuja and Madhva. Then you will understand how much evolved our intellectual process in India has been and how we have tried to address these fundamental problems. So,
HinduKnowledgeAcademy.com will celebrate Vedic culture and present its philosophies to the modern Hindu in an accessible format. Our ancient heritage is our greatest strength. Through preservation and dissemination, together let us spread positivity in the world. Thank you for listening and welcome to Hindu Knowledge Academy.